The funky music
There it is.
begins.
All right. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fox Valley Voice, the only live YouTube interview show based in the Fox Valley, about the Fox Valley, about the interesting people and places and events therein, and here to tell us about her story, joining me live in the studio, to my left, your right, Miss Cynthia K. Wade. Don't forget the K, right?
Don't forget the K, yes, because I'm not an independent filmmaker.
Well, Cynthia, thank you for joining me today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
And we are here to talk about, ultimately, your new nonprofit organization called DoOver.me.
Right.
This is something that adults in transition can come to your organization for assistance with that transition.
That's correct.
And so that's just the short of it. That's the teaser. And we are going to spend the rest of the show filling out the big picture here. But first of all, we are going to start, as we usually do, with the backstory.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Are you from this area originally?
I am. I was born and raised in the Chicago suburbs, actually born in Oak Park and raised most of my life in the north or northwest suburbs. But I've been out here in the Fox Valley for about 25 years.
Okay. So Oak Park, that's pretty close to the city.
Yes.
One of the original suburbs.
Correct.
I'm sure as time has gone on here, the suburbs kind of keep getting farther and farther away, right?
Right.
I think they do. I think they think DeKalb is a suburb now.
I'm sure they do.
Right.
Or maybe not quite as far as DeKalb because the train doesn't go there, but a lot of it is the distance for traveling from the city that people have to do to get back and forth to work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It goes out to Elburn now, so I guess Elburn
is pretty close.
Is a suburb.
Yeah.
So now, what did you find yourself doing when you were a youngster? What were you into?
Anything creative.
Okay.
And nothing athletic.
Okay.
Because that was my brother's bastion.
Okay.
I did a lot of things that involved writing. I kept a journal from the time that I was about 14, and I actually have all of the journals that I've kept for all of these years. Some years are more prolific than other years.
Okay.
But so I've done a lot of writing through the years. I also have done a lot of creative play, like with things like Barbies. But it wasn't just the Barbie itself. It was setting up the Barbie house and the Barbie village and, creating a Barbie furniture out of different kinds of cardboard boxes and, stuff like that, turning a Kleenex box into a bed.
So,
I love to color and just do pretty much anything that was in the creative arts.
Okay. And did that lead you to a certain field of study when it came time for schooling?
It did. Advertising and marketing.
Okay.
So I spent the first 18 years of my working career in business-to-business advertising and marketing. And I think much of who I am today in terms of both personally and professionally, and certainly part of the skills that I bring to DoOver.me, involve that marketing concept of how you present yourself to the world.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go to school?
I went to a school called Ray Vogue College of Design, which is now part of the Illinois Institute of Art.
Okay.
Because
right.
we're going back a ways.
Okay. And now, did you ever get involved in any hands-on artistic type stuff? Did you have to take any art classes or do anything like that? Did you ever get into that end of it? Yeah,
because the courses that I took were to gear me to be a graphic designer in the advertising world. So I was not, even though I did a lot of writing, I was not doing writing when I was in the advertising agency business. I was doing graphic design where I was actually doing the conceptual and production art that was necessary to produce ads and brochures. And back when I started, it was long before computers. Mm-hmm. So we started off with drawing boards and T-squares and rubber cement and X-Acto knives and so hands-on, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sure you still carry a lot of that with you internally in terms of your design background. Have you seen anything lately that gets you excited as far as design? Like does something jump out at you and you say to yourself, wow, that's really good graphic design right there?
You mean in terms of like what you would see in...
Yeah, just anything lately, any kind of marketing or advertising or something that some contemporary examples of good design in your estimation.
That's an interesting question, and I got to say that I actually probably can't come up with anything right off the top of my head as far as a visual element. But what I can tell you that really excites me is this whole idea of personal branding that is being talked about so much, because I think that we have always had a personal brand. Most of us have not known that we have it, and now that we have the accessibility of social media for even just common everyday folks, it becomes really even more important for us to understand who we are, the brand that we are, and then how we're projecting that to the world. And I think that that's the part of it that excites me more than actual, like a design of a logo or something like that.
That's an interesting point because, like you said before, especially before social media, really the only way that regular everyday folks, would even get their personal brand noticed would either be by their neighbors or the people they work with, right?
Right.
I mean, those are the only people.
Family.
Yeah.
But
now you can kind of cultivate an audience even if you're just yourself. You don't have to be a celebrity or a movie star or anything like that.
Exactly. And more people are doing that. And I think you're going to see that line that we used to have between personal and professional lives blurring even more in future generations, where kids are getting online and establishing themselves as a brand that they're going to have in both their personal life and their professional life. And they're going to continue it throughout their life and continue to kind of build on it as they go.
Wow.
It's really exciting, I think.
That's exciting, but a little bit scary as well, because when you're talking about kids and their online activities, they're not always thinking down the road.
Absolutely. Which is one of those things that it's really important to make sure that they understand that they have to start as they mean to continue, and it's never, ever going to go away. That stuff is out there forever.
You cannot erase the internet.
Correct.
Wow, we could probably do an entire show just on kids and the internet because, kids haven't changed over the generations. I mean, kids do silly stuff and they get in trouble, and then usually at some point they straighten out and they become productive citizens, right?
Right.
But the good part about the good old days was that you could leave all of that stuff behind you and start fresh. Usually around college or maybe after college, but, you can, I don't know about you, you were probably, very well behaved your entire life. But I know that I could probably look to a certain point and there's a line that delineates,
Right.
Your silly, childhood and, well, I wouldn't necessarily call myself an adult yet, but, going past that point to where now you want to have a good reputation and your work ethic and things like that.
Right.
So, if you're talking about if all the stuff that I did as a kid would still be out there on the internet, I'd probably be in trouble.
Yeah. But hopefully it'll be an opportunity for us as a society to learn a little bit better about tolerance, because there are certain things that are appropriate when you're a kid that are not appropriate when you're an adult. And if you see that in somebody's past when they were a kid, then, that's just part of being a kid, and, you tolerate it because that's what kids do. Mm-hmm. It's when you bring all those things into adulthood and at the point where you should be thinking more about the responsibilities that you as an individual have, and you're still doing all those crazy, goofy, self-destructive or even worldly destructive things, that then you got to start to be a little bit concerned.
Yeah. Well, I see that as a challenge, going forward, not just for me, but, for the youngsters out there. I should mention also that if you're listening or watching live right now, you are welcome to join the conversation. You can find us on Facebook at Fox Valley Voice, If you're watching it on YouTube, you can just comment in underneath the video, and then we can see that as well. But feel free to send your comments and questions to Cynthia as we're chatting here.
It would be wonderful to know that there's actually somebody out there listening.
Yes, if you're listening, just take a minute just to say hi. Just type in and say hi. All right, Cynthia. So you graduated from with a graphic design, advertising, marketing degree, and you went to work in the corporate world for how long?
18 years.
Okay.
I worked for small business-to-business advertising agencies in the Chicago metropolitan area.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when was your most recent gig like that? How long ago did you get out of that business?
Well, I got out of that business when my daughter was born, and she's 23, so...
So
23
do the math.
years ago,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Right.
All right.
Right.
And then, so your daughter was born, and what did you find yourself doing after that? I mean, obviously raising your family, but
right. I loved my career in the advertising and marketing world, but I decided that if I was going to do the baby thing, I better get on the stick and do it. So I got pregnant and I had my daughter, and I was in a position to be able to stay home with her. So I did do that. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. She was a great baby. She was happy. She was healthy. She was adaptable. She wasn't a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And I was bored, quite honestly.
So that's what made it difficult.
It made it difficult, yeah, because you don't get praised for having a clean, happy baby. And having your husband come home and having the house be clean and the laundry done and dinner on the table. That's just things that people expect women, to do.
Yeah.
But I was used to being in a very fast-paced environment where you are only as good as your last campaign, so you're constantly in a position of having to prove yourself. And, motherhood was not the challenge that for me that it is for some people.
Sure.
So I stayed home with her for 5 years, and then when she was going to school, I decided that I should go back to work. But at the time, my husband, her father, was in a position where he traveled a lot. So it was going to be, plus we were out here in the Fox Valley. So it was going to be hard for me to get a job back in the advertising agency business because of the amount of time that you had to put into it. So I got a job at a church in the Fox Valley area as their assistant director of religious education. And if you would have ever told me that I was going to work in a church running a school program, I would have said you were nuts. But I just kind of fell into it by accident. It was one of those opportunities that just sort of is in front of you, so you take advantage of it. And the next thing I knew, I was divorcing her dad and needed a job. So the woman that I was working for decided to go back to work as a teacher. And I asked for the job and received it, got it, and ended up working there for 7.5 years. And during the 7.5 years, my position went from assistant director of religious education, part-time, very part-time, with virtually no pay, to a full-time position with pay and benefits as the director of lifespan religious education. And I virtually tripled the size of most of the measurables, the significant measurables in the program during the time that I was there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Now, were you always would you consider yourself a spiritual person? I know, that's kind of a... And I really don't talk about religion all that much on the show, but, I mean, you brought it up. So, I mean, I guess
okay, so
what I'm getting at with the question is, you ended up as the director of religious education, but is that something that you had much of a background in at the time?
No, I had no background in it. I had no background in the religion or in education. None. But what I did have a background in was marketing. And that was part of the challenge. And that was one of the reasons why I was able to grow the program, because I marketed the program both within the community, the church community itself, but also in the larger Geneva community.
Okay. So you weren't in charge of curriculum or anything like that?
Well, we were part of, it was the Unitarian Universalist Society of Geneva, and the way that I got there was because I was born and raised Roman Catholic, but my daughter's father was Jewish. Neither one of us wanted our daughter to be raised in our religion, so we went looking for something that was going to work. Unitarian Universalism works for a lot of different people that come from a mixed religious background because it's truly non-doctrinal. It's not even Christian. It's non-doctrinal, which is one of the reasons why Jewish people, atheists, agnostics, pagans are welcome there too. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know anything about it, but I did know, like I said, how to market the program within the walls of the church itself and then within the larger community. I have some really strong organizational skills, so I was able to build an infrastructure where we were able to continually deliver the same product over and over. So the curriculum that you asked about actually came from the Unitarian Universalist Association. We were buying it, and then we were repurposing it within the walls of UUSG.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like it could have been a church, it could have been a dairy farm, it could have been whatever. You could have gone in and did your thing regardless.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We don't have to get into details about how you feel about religion or politics or anything like that. So.
Okay.
All
That's
right.
probably good.
Yeah. So you did that for 7.5 years, you said?
I did until my daughter was in middle school, and then I decided I better get a real job. And so I contacted the man who had helped me find jobs when I was in advertising and marketing, a recruiter that I had worked with, and asked him if he could help me. And he said, sure, but before I do, I think you should come and talk to me. So I did, and the next thing I knew, I was a recruiter. And so I spent the last 11 years before I started DoOver.me being a corporate recruiter. And
so the recruiter recruited you to be a recruiter?
Correct. Exactly. And, well, he said, you did exactly what you need to do as a recruiter in order to be successful. And that is, you thought about what you wanted to do and who could help you. You looked up and found me. You either remembered my name or discovered it. You picked up the phone in spite of the fact that I haven't heard from you in years and said, hi, my name is Cynthia Wade. Can you help me? Well, that's exactly what you have to do when you're a recruiter. Mm-hmm. So he said, you've got all of the skills that you need to be successful in this job. So I did. And, the first few years were great. I took to it very quickly. I was successful within 6 weeks. I had my first placement. And I really enjoyed it because it was a booming economy, and then the bottom fell out. Mm-hmm. And recruiters are paid corporate recruiters, when you work for a company, are usually paid a salary. But third-party recruiters, which is what I was doing, are paid on commission only. And it's a challenge to do that when you're a single mom and don't have help. It's also a challenge when the economy goes south and there aren't any jobs, and the jobs that are there have literally thousands of people applying for them. Why do they want to hire me? So it became much more difficult at the end. Plus, I didn't like the way the industry was changing in response to what was happening, and people weren't behaving themselves, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And so I just decided that when I lost my job in July of last year, 2013, I decided that I wasn't ever going to go back to that again, and I was going to start something on my own, and something that I could control and that I could decide what I wanted to do and who I wanted to do it with and how I was going to do it, so that I could be proud of what I was doing instead of being embarrassed by some of the things that I was asked to do.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Anything that you'd like to share with our with our audience?
Let's just say that the companies, very few of them have your interests at heart. They are only thinking about themselves. Mm-hmm. And so when you're interacting with them, that's the position that you have to take by default in defense. You have to be thinking about yourself.
Mm. Okay. So last year in 2013, it was time for you to start over.
Yeah, I had my own do-over. It wasn't the first, but It was the first time I really thought about it in terms of do-over. I turned 60. I had total shoulder replacement. surgery. My daughter was moving out for the first time because she stayed at home after she graduated from high school, went to Wabansi for a couple of years, transferred to a university downtown, but then she still stayed at home because she was commuting. So she met a guy and was moving out, and then I lost my job, and it was like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah.
And oh my God, what am I going to do now? And that's sort of what DoOver.me is all about. People who are hit with one or more transitions simultaneously that cause them to say, what just happened? And more importantly, what am I going to do now?
Had you thought about this before it happened to you, or was this the beginning of DoOver.me?
That was the beginning of DoOver.me. And initially I started to try to do it as a for-profit business because I had had a consulting business for a number of years where I did career coaching, help people with resume writing, with LinkedIn profile development, doing coaching prior to interviews, stuff like that. So initially that's what I thought I was going to resurrect and try to do. But it became apparent very quickly that there were many more people out there that needed my help than I could, that weren't prepared to pay for it, okay? Even though I was trying to keep my prices very reasonable, the people weren't in a position to be able to pay for it for any number of different reasons. And so I started looking into it and realized that there really wasn't anything in terms of a career counseling center in the Fox Valley area. You have to go to Naperville for the Naperville Community Career Center or Barrington for the Career Place in Barrington. There's nothing here in the Tri-Cities that helps people who are in career transition. The other thing that I realized is it's not just about the hard skills, especially if you've been out of work for any period of time. You can rewrite your resume and your LinkedIn profile a zillion times, but if you still don't have a job, you got a problem. And there's a couple things that you have to be thinking about. One is those soft skills that we talked about, that emotional intelligence. Are you resilient? Do you have optimism? Do you, look at the world in terms of abundance? Do you have that positive attitude when you go into any kind of a situation? Because people pick up on that. They may not be able to articulate what it is that they sense about you that doesn't make you a fit in their organization, but they will sense it. And you need to address those issues with people that are in transition, especially if they've been in transition for a long period of time, because they get stuck and then they get scared and then they get depressed and then they get, totally withdrawn, and it's not a good place. And the other thing is that the reality is that some jobs and some situations are never going to be like they used to be. You got to face up to that and live with that and realize that if you're continuing to beat your head against a brick wall by wanting to do what you used to do, but you're never going to be able to do that, who are you hurting? You're only hurting yourself. You've got to have a plan B. But again, people are stuck. It's when the future looks so different from what's behind them that they can't even begin to imagine what it's going to be like. And so they just totally shut down, get stuck, and don't want to go anywhere. I have a lot of resiliency. I'm not quite sure why or where it came from. It's one of those 5 core characteristics that don't change over a lifetime. I happen to have a lot of it. Not that I don't get down, not that I don't, have bad days, because I do when I don't want to get out of bed. Everybody has those. But eventually I pull myself back up and go on. And some people don't do that as well.
Well, and that's the definition of resilience, isn't it?
Yeah. Getting back up.
Getting back up.
How many times are you going to get back up?
Yeah.
Right. And so DoOver.me morphed out of Cynthia K. Wade Consulting because I wanted to reach more people and I wanted to be able to help people even if they couldn't pay. So as a not-for-profit, we were in a position to be able to ask for grant money, ask for donations, because we do have our 501c3, so we're a registered, with the IRS, not-for-profit. And so we're in a position to be able to help people. So the way that it works is that if you have the ability to pay, you do. But if you don't, you can request scholarship aid, and we're going to help you anyway. We're not going to turn anybody away.
Okay. So how far, you said you left your previous position in June?
Correct. Actually, July 17th.
July of 2013. And then how soon did you start working on the nonprofit?
Well, I started working right away because I was a single woman, and you
Right.
have to in order to keep the lights on. So I initially started to try to do consulting and
Right.
did some, contract gigs and stuff. And all the time that this was happening, I was paying attention to the changes that were going on in my life and how I was readjusting to all these different situations that I found myself in. I was looking into some jobs, and it wasn't until the winter of 2014 that the idea of DoOver.me started to come together. And I ordered some books from Amazon, used books from Amazon on how to start a not-for-profit. And I started reading and started talking to people and asking a lot of questions, educating myself. And on March 24th, 2014, we filed the papers for incorporation in the state of Illinois. So that meant I had two gentlemen that I had worked with previously that were on my board of directors, because you have to have three in order to get started.
Okay.
So there was three of us, and they signed their names, and I asked them because I knew that they wouldn't say no, literally. They have good skill sets too, and they're great guys, and they know me really well, but I also knew that they wouldn't say no.
Would you like to give them a shout out?
Sure. We have a great board of directors. We have George Tattersfield and Brad Littman, who are the two men that started DoOver.me with me. And then we have two new board members, Kathy Underwood and Natasha Kiefer. So,
Okay.
and we have actually, our bylaws allow for 7, so we are still looking for 2 board members. We would love to have an accountant, and we would love to have a lawyer on the board.
Okay.
So anyway, we filed on November 24th, and then the next step was to get the papers in for the 501c3, which is very complicated and not easy to get. And it's a 26-page application, and then with all of the stuff that you have to add, the packet ended up being like this big.
Oh, my.
I mailed that on April 17th, and they tell you that if everything is in order and they don't have any questions, you'll hear from them probably with an approval in 90 days. But if they have any questions or if anything is amiss, you're looking at 6 months or more. So having never done this before, I didn't have any doubt that ultimately we would get it, but I never in a million years dreamed that we would get it in the 90 days.
You got it on the first shot.
I did.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was really
Congratulations.
amazing.
Well, that just means that there was a lot of attention to detail.
Yes.
That was paid.
Yes. And I tend to give more information, as you can probably tell, than less, which I think the IRS likes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, good.
yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That prevents a lot of, time being wasted and duplication of efforts and feet dragging and sandbagging and things like that. So
Right.
good.
Right.
Good.
Right.
All right. So now tell us about the mission. Okay. We've kind of mentioned transition and, looking to help people, but let's get a little bit into detail about how you can help, because there might be someone who's listening or watching right now and saying, well, this doesn't really apply to me, but maybe it does.
Okay, so let's first talk then about what a transition is, because when you say transition, people have a lot of different understandings of what that means, and most of what we've spoken about so far has been career transition, which is certainly a big one for all of us, especially if we're having to make it not of our own choice. But there are lots of other transitions that life throws at you, becoming an empty nester like I did when my daughter finally decided to move out, getting a divorce, experiencing a death, having a incredible health scare, even if it doesn't turn out that you have breast cancer, that whole process that you have to go through, when you're having all the additional testing and being done when you're waiting to find out, it's scary, when you retire voluntarily, it can even be a significant transition. There's lots of things that life throws at you that are transitions, and DoOver.me can help with all of them. And the reason why we can is because although what's caused your transition may be different from the guy sitting next to you, and where you want to go is going to be different from where they want to go, the reality of how you feel in that transition is really much more similar than you think. You're scared. That's the primary overriding feeling. You're scared, and that fear paralyzes you.
Yeah, it's fear of the unknown, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Yes.
And fear of change.
And change.
Yes.
People fear change.
Exactly.
That's
So DoOver.me offers a wide variety of different workshops and lectures and programs and one-on-one counseling that are going to help people move through that fear to actively look at who they are, what they want, and then how they're going to get it.
Okay. Now, how are you able to provide these services? It's not just you, right? You have other folks that are working with you in order to...
Well, we have the board of directors, and then we do have other people that are working with us, but really nobody is getting paid yet. I mean, this, as you can see, we're about 7 months old, so we're very, very young, so nobody's getting paid yet.
Okay.
But we do have other people that work with us. You know, through the years, I've built up a wide variety of different kinds of support around me, and some of those people have come in and agreed to be workshop leaders or presenters. We also have coaches and facilitators that are on board that are helping us with specific activities. We actually now just have hired and are beginning to work with another resume writer, so people that need that service are not always going to be working with me. So all of those people are coming on board as we need them, but at this point, everything is being volunteered.
Okay. How are people finding out about DoOver.me?
That's a great question because I'm not
Besides doing radio shows and things like that.
Yeah, well, this is my first radio show and things like that. So, but I am very active on social media. I blog and have been blogging for a number of years. I've got a really huge presence on both Facebook and LinkedIn. So I've just been spreading the word through social media and talking to people. You know, I give out business cards in coffee shops. You know, you're sitting there at the coffee bar at Arcedium and you overhear a conversation about a guy complaining about, you know, the challenges he's having finding work, and so I whip out my business card and hand him the business card, and the next thing I know, he's calling me. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways, but now that we're moving into our first space, which is what's been happening over the last 2 weeks.
Yes, that's a recent development.
Yes, we are now have offices at 1141 Commerce Drive in Geneva, and now that that's happening, we're really trying to get the word out. You know, that's a big part of our mission now, to speak in front of different groups, to have people come into us. We have a introducing DoOver.me scheduled for Monday evening, the 3rd of November at 7 in the evening. And then again on Saturday, I think it's the 8th of November at 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll be doing that once a month on the first Monday and the first Saturday of the month to try to get the word out. That's a free opportunity for people to come in, see the space, meet me, have an opportunity to hear about what we can do, the specifics of the kinds of classes that we're going to offer, and then ask any of the questions that are pertinent to their particular situation.
Let's do a walkthrough. Let's just say that I am someone who heard about you. I was complaining about being out of work at the coffee shop, and then you came over and you gave me your business card. What's the flow in terms of the assistance that I could get? So I call you up and we set up an appointment, and then what happens?
Well, the first thing I would do is encourage you to come to one of these new introducing DoOver.me classes, because we could do it one-on-one, but one of the ideas of the space and the classes was to be able to get an economy of scale. So rather than talking to 6 people and taking an hour with each of them, it would be better to take 1 hour and talk to 6 people simultaneously. So while we always are available for one-on-one interaction, because we recognize that that's important, you know, some of it we have to be able to economize by doing it in a group. So that's the first thing I would do, is encourage you to come to one of those. If that wasn't possible, then I would sit down with you one-on-one and explain to you a little bit about who we are and what we do. But most of all, learn about you and where you're at and what you need, because this is all very individualized service, and either you have to know or I have to help you begin to know and pull out of you why you are where you're at, because that's a big piece of it. Not just what happened, but why did it happen? And the reality of where is it that you really want to go? Because, you know, you may have been an accountant for 10 years and you're frustrated with your job, and it may not be the job, it may be the fact that you really aren't meant to be an accountant and you really need to be looking at something else. So what we're going to do then is with the first things first classes, because we've got a nice large room for us to be able to do it. And the reason why it's important, in addition to what I said earlier about the laughter, and it's also physical, you find yourself moving around and using your body, which is also important. But it's also important because improv teaches business skills. There's been a lot of articles in the paper just in the last 6 months about how companies are using Second City and Improv Olympics to come in and do training for their employees, because improv teaches things like teamwork, it teaches decision making, it teaches vocabulary, it teaches you to own your own voice and be able to, command an audience, whether that's the one person that's sitting across from you in a conversation or an entire room. It teaches you yes and. That's one of the primary skills. And how much better would the world be if we all answered each other yes and? Because when you say no to somebody or something, it immediately stops the conversation, puts that other person on the defensive. And what have you got in terms of being able to collaborate? It makes it a lot harder. So if you can learn to say yes, and I think we should also, or yes, and how would you feel if we, and respond positively, and then try to move it forward in a direction that is going to be workable for both of you. I mean, that alone is a skill that, it could change the world.
Does it have to be yes and? Could it be yes but?
No. No.
Yes, but you're wrong.
No.
You can't do that?
No, that's like,
okay.
Yeah, you'd have a problem with that, Jaime. We have to get you to improv, but I know you do something on Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
We're going to be adding more classes because people have approached us and not been able to join us on the Wednesday evenings that we have had it scheduled. Oh, we do have it scheduled. So we're going to be adding more classes.
It's tough to work on in everyone's schedule, though.
Sure, but I'd like to have more than one option for people.
Unless you do 7 nights a week, then no.
There's other things that are going to be happening on those other nights.
No, you just responded with no.
Oh, sorry. See, I needed to. The whole thing is it's a process. It's not definitive.
I really appreciate the improv. I mean, I think I could give it a go, but it's so hard to do well. I mean, because I've seen some, I don't want to say bad improv, but just improv. I mean, it's much harder than you think.
No.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
and
yes. And when you get there, you'll find that it is easier than what you imagined it would be, especially in our situation, because we're not a performance group. There are a few people in there that have ambitions to be performers, but most of us are there because we want to have fun and we want to learn something. So we say, what happens at improv stays at improv. You're coming into an environment where everybody's going to be accepting, where you're going to be allowed to fail, because that's part of this whole, moving forward as opposed to getting stuck. People don't want to move forward into the unknown, because if they don't know what it's like, the chances of them failing are a lot higher. And most people are afraid to fail, when the reality is that we learn everything that we learn from our failures, not usually from our successes. So being able to fail at improv in this close-knit, safe situation, isn't that a lot better than failing, on stage when you're doing a performance, or presenting some information about your company? The other thing is stepping outside of the box, thinking outside of the box. Everybody talks about that as a skill that's so much in demand, thinking outside of the box. Well, it's not just about thinking outside of the box. It's about being able to act outside of the box. Improv encourages you to do that. You're going to be doing things that you never thought you would do and laughing and having fun with it, and realizing that, even if you literally fall on your face, it's okay. It's okay, because somebody's going to pick you back up and dust you off, and, y'all are going to laugh about it.
I do have to admit about myself that I try to avoid situations where I think I'm going to fail. And that there's entire books written about how you're supposed to fail, right? But that goes against pretty much everything that I've thought about for most of my life. So I'm trying to get to a point where I get a little more comfortable with it, which it just sounds funny even saying that, getting comfortable with failure, because you're supposed to not, yeah, I don't know. So anyway,
It's a societal thing, and it's tough to make a personal change when society seems to be fighting against you. But the reality is, if you look at somebody like Michael Jordan and think about how many times he has had to throw that basketball up in order to guarantee that he's going to be able to hit 10 out of 10.
mhm,
He didn't start out hitting 10 out of 10. I guarantee you that. You may have to go back really far before you find out, that he was missing, 9 out of 10. But nobody starts out at that level. Everybody has to grow into it. Malcolm Gladwell in his book, The Outliers, talks about needing 10,000 hours of doing something well in order to be able to do it at an expert level.
mhm.
Well, we're not asking you to be an expert at improv. We're just asking you to get better at it so that you can have an opportunity to use those skills. And by doing it on a regular basis, you're creating a muscle memory, just like Jackson, not
Michael Jordan.
Jordan, excuse me. Michael Jordan did when he was starting to throw that.
I know you said you just recently moved into your new space, but you've already been working with some folks
Yes, we
that
have.
were in transition,
Yes,
and you already have some success stories.
we do. We call them when pigs fly.
Okay, so you've had some flying pigs already.
Yes, we have.
Anything that you'd care to share with us today?
Well, there's a couple of really interesting stories. The first woman that I worked with was the daughter of a longtime friend of mine, and she had a degree in teaching, and was having really good success getting interviews, but she wasn't getting an offer.
Mhm.
And she couldn't quite figure out what was happening, the disconnect in the interview situation. Well, it was really easy to figure out when I met her and had an opportunity to sit down and talk with her. She really didn't know how to successfully handle an interview situation. We worked together on that specific topic for about 5 weeks, and during that time she was able to have a couple more interviews, and the last one that she had, she got an offer. So she's back
Okay.
at work, or not back at work, but she is got her first full-time teaching job.
Excellent.
So yeah, so that's good.
So that was a situation where you identified it after talking with her. What are some of the tips that you give people in terms of improving their interview performance?
Well, again, it's very personal because some people do it well, some people do it very, very poorly.
Mhm.
You really have to talk with that person and see where their challenges are. But I think the biggest problem that people have is that they don't answer the question that's asked because they're not listening,
Oh.
which is also something you're going to learn in improv.
Mhm.
Okay, you can't prepare yourself for the question when you don't know what question's going to be asked.
Mhm.
So you have to really listen to what's being asked and make sure you're answering that question,
Okay.
as opposed to having like the sound bites that we all are unhappy with our politicians spouting off. They, come out. I think they wake up in the morning and over their coffee, look at all the things that they have to say during the course of that day, regardless of whether they make sense in context or not. And then they just say them. Well, in an
Yeah.
interview situation, that's not the way you want to play it.
Right. Okay. So you have to avoid the canned response.
Correct.
Yeah. Um, I think that myself, and I know that you think that I'm this dynamic speaker, right? And you can agree with me, but I have found that whenever I have had an interview in the past, and you go to instant replay, right? As soon as you walk out the room, and you're
Mhm.
thinking to yourself, "How did I do?" And I look back, and the number one problem that I would identify about myself in an interview is that I turn into a monotone robot whenever I'm in an interview. And I think it's because I'm thinking so much about what I'm trying to say that um, that's where all my energy goes, is to the whole thought process. And then when I start talking, it's like I'm reading off of a page instead of actually responding as in a conversational tone.
Yeah, that's very typical. And most people don't interview a significantly enough number of times during the course of their life to get good at it. You probably wouldn't really want to be good at it.
Mhm.
But there are tools that we can help you to see and learn to use that are going to help you to be able to relax a little bit. Having the preparation ahead of time and then having a debrief immediately after are two of the things that can help you to really see where you're having the problem and what you can do to try to make it better going forward.
Now, being a nonprofit organization, that doesn't mean that you don't need funding.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So, what are the plans in terms of raising funds for the organization?
Well, there's 3 revenue streams that we're looking at. The first is our clientele, because as I said earlier, there is a $25 one-time non-refundable registration fee for everybody that comes through doover.me. And then there's an additional $150 a year membership. And for that, you get some of the services for free and some of them are discounted. And it just kind of depends on what it is that you're going to put on your plate that's going to make sense for you. And as I said, too, scholarships are available. You can get either a 50% scholarship, 100% scholarship, or you can be allowed to pay over time as opposed to in one lump sum.
Okay.
So that's one way. The second way is gifts. You know, we have a donation page on our website, which is www.doover.me, and the do-over has a hyphen in it, so it's www.do-over.me.
Okay.
So where there's a donation page, we can take PayPal, or you can send us a check if you'd like to do that at 1141 Commerce Drive in Geneva, and the zip is 60134. So right now, that's probably the primary way, because one of the challenges of the third stream, which is actually writing grants, is that most people who are giving grants are only looking at established NFPs. So because we've been in business for only 7 months, we've done a lot in 7 months, but it's still only 7 months, it's going to be tough to get grants. But that's actually my next priority. Once we've got, we're moved in and settled in doOver.me, and we've got the calendar up and running so that people have activities, we're going to be getting more people through the doors. And then the next step for me is going to be figuring out how to write those grants.
Okay. And in terms of grant organizations that give grants, what is the cutoff in terms of them considering a nonprofit as being established? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? How long is it?
That's a really good question, and I'm not 100% sure the answer to that, because I'm kind of learning as I'm going, and I haven't quite gotten to that yet. But from what I've seen so far, it's usually at least 1 and preferably 3 years that they're looking for.
Okay.
But if there's anybody out there that does grant writing that wants to help, I sure would love the help.
Yeah. How about corporate sponsorships?
Yep. We have corporate sponsorships available too, where a company can come in and for a certain level of donation, they get a certain amount of publicity on doOver.me's website and also in some of the materials that we put out. And then they also have an opportunity to get to send people through the doOver.me program at a reduced cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I've got one last official question for you. Who is Bella?
Bella. Bella is my do-over dog. She's a 3-year-old West Highland Terrier, and I adopted her last November. She'll be with me a year on November 9th. And she was one of the very best things that I did for myself when I was in that dark place, because Bella is, this is going to sound crazy, but I like to think of her as being my mom reincarnated, because she was born 6 weeks after my mom passed away. Because like your mom, or like my mom, Bella is always happy to see me no matter what the situation is, and she loves me unconditionally. So Bella's my do-over dog.
Okay, Bella got a do-over.
Bella got a do-over. My friend George Chattersfield, said Bella didn't have to die to go to heaven.
Oh gosh.
Yes. So
excellent. And does Bella hang out at the offices with you, or?
Don't tell the landlord.
Okay.
But yes, sometimes she does. She loves people. She loves other people. She's not great with other dogs, but she loves people.
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, shout out to Bella. And
she's at home listening.
Okay. Well, she should have wrote in with a question. Like, are you going to bring home some treats?
Yes, Bella. I always bring home treats.
All right. Anything else that we need to touch on? I think we pretty much got all your. Oh wait, free headshots. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
So this is for LinkedIn accounts and things like that.
Facebook, whatever you need.
Yeah.
On November 21st, we're having a professional photographer come out to doover.me for the entire day. That's a Friday. And she's going to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock in the evening. So you can come at any time. You don't need to have an appointment. It goes really quickly. During some of the busier hours, you may have to wait a little bit, but it should go pretty fast. It's not totally free. We are asking for a donation to doover.me, but that can be as little as $10, whatever you want. 10, 20, 100, 1,000.
Which is a great deal.
Yeah. Whatever.
Maybe not at 1,000, but $10, $20, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. For a professional photo.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the date on that again?
It's Friday, November 21st. And it'll also give you an opportunity to come in and see our space and meet me. And the other thing I would say is, just in closing, if you have any questions or would like to talk further, please feel free to give me a call. My telephone number is 630-402-0429. You can always look us up on our website. As I said, it's www.do-over.me. There's lots of information there. It's constantly changing. So we're here to help.
Excellent. So if you're listening or watching right now, this may apply to you, or it may be somebody you know.
Or both.
But if you are in some kind of transition, be it professional, personal, health, anything like that, your best bet is to contact Cynthia and the rest of the good folks at doover.me. And Cynthia, I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's my pleasure. And, anything else I can do for you, you let me know.
Okay.
And thank you, listeners and viewers, for hanging out with us today. You can find more information about the show on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, YouTube, definitely. Just search for Fox Valley Voice, and that's where you'll find us. We'd like to thank some friends of the show, Neighbors Magazines. If you are a resident of St. Charles, Geneva, Batavia, or North Aurora, you will get the next issue of Neighbors Magazines here at the beginning of November. And if you are a business owner who wants to reach the people who live in those communities, contact me and I can help you. Also like to thank Downtown Auroran Magazine. You can find them at downtownaurorian.com for the scoop on what's happening down there. And we'd like to thank our video sponsor, Drendel and Jansen's Law Group in Batavia. You can find them at batavialaw.com. And thanks again, and we will chat with you next time.